The golden sunlight bathed the rolling hills of the Yellowstone grasslands, transforming the landscape into a shimmering expanse of amber. Amidst the knee-high prairie grass, Leora, a sleek bobcat with tawny fur and intricate black rosettes, crouched low, her sharp eyes fixed on a herd of pronghorn antelope grazing roughly 100 meters away. Her 3 kittens, tucked into a patch of tall grass, watched their mother with quiet intensity, learning the art of patience. Leora's gaze was not only on potential prey, but also on the ever-present threats around them. She had lost her mate to a trapper just 5 months prior, leaving her solely responsible for her kitten's survival. Not far off, Sarah Bennett, a 52-year-old Canadian wildlife photographer with silver-streaked auburn hair and weathered hands, knelt silently, her camera lens trained on the bobcat family. With 35 years of experience capturing the wild, Sarah had mastered the art of blending into her surroundings, waiting for the perfect shot without disrupting nature's rhythm. Yellowstone was a familiar haunt, but this journey held deeper meaning. After her only daughter moved abroad for graduate school, Sarah's Vancouver apartment felt hollow. That emptiness had drawn her back to the American West, her camera now focused on a new project, documenting familial bonds in the animal kingdom. Leora began to move, her lithe form melting into the golden grass. Her kittens followed, mimicking her stealthy crouch. Sarah steadied her breath and clicked the shutter, the faint sound blending with the breeze. Through her lens, she watched Leora guide her kittens in a practice stalk, not a hunt, but a lesson in survival. The scene stirred memories of teaching her daughter to kayak on the Pacific coast, the same quiet patience and unspoken love woven into each careful gesture. Day after day, Sarah returned to the same ridge, tracking the bobcat family. She captured Leora teaching her kittens to pounce, shielding them from coyotes and the rare moments when the kittens tumbled playfully in the dust. Each photograph was more than a snapshot. It was a fragment of a story about motherhood and resilience, one Sarah felt compelled to share. The turning point came one dusky evening. A group of reckless tourists in off-road vehicles roared too close to the bobcat family, spooking Leora and scattering her kittens. In the chaos, the smallest kitten, with bright, inquisitive eyes, was left behind, trembling in a thicket. Sarah watched, her heart heavy with frustration. As the vehicle sped off, she edged closer, spotting the frightened kitten. She froze, keeping her distance but staying visible. Leora emerged from a nearby copse, her body tense, eyes locking with Sarah's in a fleeting moment of mutual understanding. Sarah stepped back slowly, giving Leora space to retrieve her kitten. As the bobcat led her little one back to its siblings, she cast a glance at Sarah, not wary, but acknowledging, perhaps even grateful. That moment shifted something in Sarah. She was no longer just a bystander. In her small tent at the campsite, reviewing the day's images, she realized Leora's world wasn't just threatened by natural predators, but by human intrusion, tourist vehicles, low-flying drones, even photographers like herself. That night, under a sky blazing with stars, Sarah wrote in her journal, "I came to capture a story of wild motherhood, but I'm uncovering another truth about our responsibility, the line between watching and interfering, and the cost of our presence." As summer waned in Yellowstone, the grass grew brittle, and herds clustered around shrinking waterholes. For Leora and her kittens, this brought both opportunity and danger. Prey was easier to find, but wolves, bears, and mountain lions loomed as threats. Sarah shifted her focus, photographing not just the bobcat family, but the broader impact of human activity. Dust clouds from speeding vehicles, tourists crowding too close, disrupting hunts and forcing animals to adapt. One morning, in the soft dawn light, Sarah witnessed a heartbreaking scene. Leora had taken down a young pronghorn, but before she could drag it to her hungry kittens, a convoy of tourist vehicles roared in, forcing her to flee. Minutes later, a pack of coyotes claimed the kill. Leora's kittens would go without food again. Anger surged in Sarah, mingled with guilt. She, too, was part of this disruption. She began speaking with park rangers, campsite staff, and tourists, sharing her observations and pushing for stricter guidelines to protect the wildlife. Sarah's photographs evolved into a powerful narrative, not just of nature's beauty, but of its fragility. Her series, Tenuous Balance, was published in a prominent conservation magazine, sparking debate. Some dismissed her as alarmist. Others lauded her for exposing the hidden impacts of ecotourism. Meanwhile, her quiet bond with Leora's family deepened. The bobcat seemed to tolerate Sarah's presence, occasionally leading her kittens closer. Sarah grew to know the kittens' distinct traits. The eldest, steady and reserved. The middle one, bold and agile. The youngest, endlessly curious, often peering at Sarah with bright, searching eyes. One afternoon, a sudden storm swept across the grasslands, wind howling and rain pounding. Sarah took shelter under a rocky overhang, only to find Leora and her kittens already there. In the tight space, human and bobcats shared a fragile truce. Sarah sat still, her pulse racing but calm, as Leora glanced at her once before tending to her kittens. When the storm cleared, Sarah captured her most striking image. Leora and her kittens atop a boulder, drenched but defiant, with a rainbow curving across the sky. Titled Endurance, it became an emblem of hope and survival. The greatest challenge came in Sarah's final weeks in Yellowstone. A pack of wolves began stalking Leora's family, pushing them toward busier tourist trails. One night, the wolves' howls echoed through the valley, and Sarah lay awake, gripped by worry. The next morning, Sarah found Leora limping, a jagged gash on her flank, yet fiercely guarding her kittens. Every instinct honed over decades of photography urged Sarah to remain detached, to document but not interfere. But her heart wouldn't allow it. She placed a small container of water and a piece of raw meat near the bobcat's hiding spot, then retreated to a safe distance. This act broke the cardinal rule of wildlife photography: non-intervention. Word spread through the Yellowstone campsite, and Sarah faced sharp rebuke. A seasoned ranger told her, "You're no longer just watching, Sarah. You're weaving yourself into their world, and that's risky, for you and them." She knew the criticism was fair, but the quiet bond she felt with Leora's family had grown beyond a mere project. It was now a personal journey, one of connection and responsibility. In her journal, Sarah wrote, "I may have crossed a photographer's line, but I found a new boundary where humans can exist alongside nature, not as invaders or disruptors, but as part of the same intricate tapestry of life." Autumn swept into Yellowstone, painting the grasslands with bursts of crimson and gold. 6 months had passed since Sarah began following Leora's family, and the kittens had transformed. No longer clumsy, they were agile young hunters, each with a distinct personality. The eldest, whom Sarah named Kale, mirrored her mother's cautious wisdom. The middle kitten, Sable, was bold and reckless, always the first to chase. The youngest, Mira, remained the curious one, her sharp eyes studying the world with quiet intelligence. Sarah's time in Yellowstone was drawing to a close. Her editor pressed for the completion of her photo book, and her daughter, Elise, was due to visit soon, their first reunion in nearly a year. Before leaving, Sarah wanted to capture final moments with the Bobcat family. At dawn, she watched Leora teach her kittens the art of solo hunting, guiding them with patient precision on how to stalk, measure distance, and pounce. Sarah's camera clicked softly, preserving a ritual as old as the wild itself, a mother preparing her young for independence. Elise arrived, 21, with her mother's sharp features and a skeptical grin. "They're just bobcats, Mom," she teased at first. But when Sarah brought her to observe Leora's family from a distance, Elise's perspective shifted. "Look at how she guides them," Sarah murmured as Kale executed her first solo stalk. "It's like when I taught you to surf or develop your first roll of film." Elise was quiet, then nodded. "I see it now," she said. "This isn't just about bobcats. It's about us." In their final days in Yellowstone, Sarah and Elise photographed together, not just the bobcat family, but the broader ecosystem, its delicate balance, and the subtle interplay of its creatures. They witnessed a milestone, Kale's first successful hunt. That evening, when Leora let Kale eat first, signaling her step into adulthood, Sarah and Elise exchanged a knowing glance. "I'm thinking," Elise said as they hiked back to camp, "maybe I'll switch my major from marketing to environmental science." Sarah's departure from Yellowstone was bittersweet. On her last morning, she visited the familiar ridge, hoping for one final glimpse of the Bobcat family. They weren't there. As she turned to leave, a rustle in the grass caught her eye. It was Mira, nearly grown, watching her from a distance, with those same curious eyes. Sarah raised her camera for one last shot. When she lowered it, Mira had slipped away into the prairie. A year later, Sarah's photo book, Heirs of the Prairie, became a cornerstone of wildlife photography, celebrated not only for its stunning images, but for the story they told, of motherhood, growth, and humanity's complex dance with nature. Elise wrote the foreword, her words resonating deeply. This is the story of a woman who sought to capture bobcats, but found a story about herself, about motherhood, about letting go, and about finding connection in the wild. Half the book's proceeds funded a conservation initiative Sarah established, focused on responsible tourism and protecting Yellowstone's predators. Part of the fund trained local guides to approach wildlife without disrupting their natural rhythms. Elise, true to her word, switched to environmental science and returned to Yellowstone 2 years later for her first field study. Sarah joined her, camera in hand, now as a storyteller and advocate rather than just a photographer. The prairie bloomed as vibrantly as ever, though changes had taken root. New regulations, spurred partly by Sarah's work, enforced stricter distances between wildlife and tourists. The number of visitors remained high, but their impact was softening. Sarah and Elise spent an afternoon searching for Leora's family, uncertain if they'd find them. Bobcats have short lives in the wild, and 2 years could bring many changes. As the sun dipped, gilding the grasslands, they spotted a familiar silhouette atop a rocky rise, a mature female bobcat, scanning the horizon. Even from afar, Sarah recognized the poised stance. "Kale," she whispered. The bobcat, now fully grown, turned toward them briefly, as if in acknowledgement. Then, from behind her, 3 tiny figures emerged, Kale's own kittens, the next generation of the prairie. A tear traced Sarah's cheek. The cycle had turned, as fierce and enduring as the land itself. She raised her camera, not to alter or intrude, but to honor the wild's relentless beauty. Elise rested a hand on her mother's shoulder. "I get it now," she said, "about letting things follow their own path." Sarah nodded, speechless. In that moment, she was more than a photographer or a mother. She was part of a vast, ongoing story of life, loss, nurturing, and release. As dusk settled, Kale led her kittens down the rise, vanishing into the golden grass. Sarah set her camera down, not to capture another frame, but to hold the moment in her heart. A vivid image woven from emotion and insight, beyond what any lens could preserve. As she and Elise trekked back to camp, she said, "Some things, Elise, no camera can truly capture." They paused on a ridge overlooking the moonlit Yellowstone prairie. From the distance, a bobcat's soft call pierced the night. Not a predator's snarl, but a quiet reminder that the wilderness remained untamed, alive with stories yet to unfold. Sarah had come to document wildlife, but she'd uncovered a deeper truth. In the embrace of nature, humans, bobcats, grasses, sun, and stars were all threads in the same timeless tale. A story without beginning or end, only cycles of renewal and rebirth. That, she realized, was the prairie's greatest lesson for those who listened. Every ending cradled a new beginning. Every goodbye held the promise of another meeting. Years later, in her 70s, Sarah received a letter from a young conservationist in Yellowstone. Enclosed was a photograph of a female bobcat poised proudly on a boulder. "We believe this is Kale's 3rd-generation descendant," the letter read. "The local rangers call this lineage the Bennett family, after the woman who taught us to see bobcats not just as animals, but as individuals with their own stories and dignity." Sarah's weathered fingers traced the image, a smile softening her face. She didn't need to return to Yellowstone to know the prairie endured, wild and free. As long as people learned to protect that wildness, the children of the prairie would keep weaving their tales. Tales she felt privileged to have briefly joined. On her desk, beside the new photograph, sat the first image she'd taken of Leora and her 3 kittens, its edges softened by time, but its beauty undimmed. 2 images, separated by nearly 2 decades, told a story words could only hint at, a story of connections that transcended years, of love without limits, and of the shared duty to care for this planet and its countless creatures. At her age, Sarah knew she might not see the next generation of bobcats, but that no longer mattered. The prairie had taught her its deepest truth. No single life stood alone, yet each was vital to the greater tapestry. Like the bobcats, we come and go, but the story endures, eternal and ever-renewing, like the prairie itself. That was Sarah Bennett's true legacy, not just her breathtaking photographs or acclaimed book, but the quiet understanding that in the wild expanse of Yellowstone, in a bobcat mother's fierce devotion, and in the bold growth of her kittens, lay universal truths about human lives. As night fell over her small cottage on Vancouver Island, Sarah stepped onto the porch and gazed at the stars, those same stars that still lit the Yellowstone prairie each night. In that moment, the boundaries between past and present, human and nature, photographer and subject dissolved. All that remained was one story, the story of life, with its beauty, sorrow, joy, and hope. It was a story Sarah had been honored to tell, but it never truly belonged to her. It belonged to the prairie, to the children of the prairie, and to all who encountered its simple yet profound message. In this fast-moving, chaotic world, there are still wild places where motherhood, resilience, and life's raw beauty thrive. And as long as those places endure, there is hope for bobcats and humans, old and young, hunters and storytellers alike. Explore bobcat conservation efforts, learn about other Yellowstone predators,